he's the one that sent the letters and said, he signed at BTK, and he said that was his MO, and he really tried to manipulate the press to cover what he had been doing. He really got off on that. So in this regard, she was called the Black Widow by media outlets. Again, it was previously given to Lynn Turner, who, of course, killed her two spouses as well. Ashley said that she does not know how her mother or any mother could try to kill her own child, a question that the public has also pondered. Castor, who professed to being shocked at the guilty verdict, maintained her innocence during the on-air 2020 special, as well as in unaired parts of the program. She said that Ashley brought this on and insists that she and Ashley know what really happened. She did express sympathy for her daughter, Bree. She called Bree an innocent. Remember that she's the favorite daughter, whom she lost along with her freedom and her husband's. She indicated that her mother, stepfather, and some other relatives still supported her. Bree, like Ashley, never spoke to Castor after the trial. Bree said that though losing her mother was hard, I was happy that they said she was guilty because we all know that she's guilty. Ashley said, I would have done anything for her, but she tried to kill me instead. Both of Castor's daughters expressed concern that their mother had not apologized to them. Castor maintained that she was innocent of the deaths of her husband and the attempted murder of Ashley. ABC interviewed forensic psychiatrist James Knoll for psychological perspective on the case, and he answered viewers' questions via video on April 23rd of 2009. And he stated that while most suicide notes focus on themes of remorse and the person not being able to go on with life, the note supposedly written by Ashley was focused on taking the blame off of Castor. He said that this theme was repeated 14 times within the note and that he believes Castor will never admit to guilt of the murders. The code of murderers such as these, he said, is deny, deny, deny until the bitter end. And we see that a lot. You see that a lot in people who aren't serial killers. Most serial killers will actually come out and but confess. They'll actually come out and confess after a certain point. Some of them actually glad that they've been caught, and they'll say that. Jeffrey Dahmer was glad that he was caught. He didn't like the way in which it happened, but he certainly was apologetic, for sure, which many of them are not. When asked about Castor's behavior and body language on the stand, it shows any sort of clue about her mental state and guilt. Knoll reminded that body language and behavior can be affected by events during a trial, such as side effects of medication, anxiety, fatigue, attorney instructions to the defendant on how to behave, and that their interpretation is not always reliable. It makes perfect sense. I mean, if I were going to testify in a trial, I would be nervous. I mean, even if I knew exactly what I was talking about, I was telling the truth, or I was analyzing a situation, I would be confident in that, but I would still be nervous because it's such an important piece of the trial that you don't want to mess up. So I believe that. I believe that if you're the one on trial, you're going to act really odd. And I think if you're, prosecuting, or if you're a witness, you also may have some anxiety that causes you to act differently than you normally would. So though Castor was not officially defined as a serial killer, it is likely she would have killed again. Now, I believe, based on the definition of serial killer, she is a serial killer. The police have actually made mention that they believe she killed her father years before for his estate. So if that were true, and if they were able to pursue that, which they're not, you would see that pattern of, greed. These were all men, of course. So the men had the money and she wanted it all to herself. So if she could get rid of them, then she would inherit. And she did this increasingly, it was more disturbing as the next, because as you know, the last one she tried to frame on her own daughter. So that speaks volumes about her character, or lack thereof. Also, I would want to pause and think about like the aces. I said earlier when we were looking at her childhood that it seemed to be fairly normal. Just that they were poor. There was nothing that really stood out that might have triggered someone thinking that, she's high on the aces, or she doesn't have any record of doing anything in the McDonald triad. None of those things are available on her. Doesn't mean she didn't do it. Just means that it never was talked about, never was discussed, or if it was never published. So, Knowles said that killers may have many different motivations, but he described Castor as a Black Widow type rather than a typical serial killer. He described a Black Widow type as a woman who kills husbands or lovers for material gain, as opposed to the typical serial killer, those who kill consecutively for sexual or sadistic motives. He relayed that psychopathic traits and histories of child abuse have been consistently reported in these women, and suggested that if Castor were guilty of the crimes in which she had been convicted and accused, then she would be demonstrating psychopathic traits, including regarding even her own child as an object to be used for her convenience. So, Noel, in essence, has deemed her to be psychopathic. I mean, of course I agree with that. You have to be a psychopath to do the things that she did, to plan those things out, to manipulate people to the extent that she did, and was never thought of to be involved in any of it until much, much later. Also, you would have to be psychotic to be a mother and try to pin this on your daughter. I can't imagine there's one thing on this earth that I would value more than my son. I feel my friends are the exact same way. There is nothing on this earth that would make me try to frame my son for a murder that I committed, or a crime that I committed, or whatever. There's nothing I would do. As a matter of fact, if he were guilty, I would try to protect him to the bitter end, right? Mothers should be like that. She, of course, was not. I would say she was probably the mother from hell. And they can probably look back now on their life and just pick out certain things that maybe weren't normal, but it just wasn't exaggerated. And we always do that. Hindsight's 20/20. We always look back. That's one of the things about shows like 20/20, shows like Forensic File, pretty much any of those true crime shows. You are looking back on the events and saying, oh, shoot, that could have been a trigger for us. That could have been a clue for us early on. Did no one pick that up? And, again, one of the serial killers that has had probably more research on his past than anyone else has been Dahmer. If you've watched any of those Dahmer documentaries, you know that they interviewed anybody that had anything to do with him, looking for things that were unusual or odd. And most of them come out and say, well, yeah, he used to do this, but he was kind of weird anyway. He got drunk before class, so we didn't really think about it when he was blah, blah, blah. So that's the only power we have in looking back at these events and saying, what can we learn from this? What do we learn from this woman who did these heinous acts and got by with it for so long? How do we use that information to create a safer world, to help our children to be safe, to be able to identify children who have these issues, these mental issues, this psychopathy? How do we look at those children and decide who needs that in just extreme intervention? That has to be something we talk about, um, because it happens. It happens all the time. There was a point in time where Castor was a young girl, a student in a classroom. Did she exhibit any kind of weird behaviors? Did she have empathy? Did she have friends? Was she a part of a group? Did she have, a group of friends or only one friend? I mean, what did that look like? What was her childhood dynamic? And how did that change during the years? Or did it change during the years? So those are very important things for us to look at, to be able to look forward and perhaps change the future of other children who might be at risk for these violent behaviors. Noel also said he relayed that psychopathic traits and histories of childhood abuse have been consistently reported in these women, and suggested that if Castor were guilty of the crimes of which she had been convicted and accused, then she would be demonstrating psychopathic traits. Here's the key to that statement. If she were guilty of the crimes in which she'd been convicted and accused, she would be demonstrating psychopathic traits. But there is no report of her being abused as a child. So you can break that down any way you want to break it down, but if we don't have direct evidence, and of course we're not going to find out from her, she was found dead in her cell on the morning of June 11th of 2016. It was not immediately apparent how she died, and the manner of her death was listed as undetermined, but it was later determined by the DA's office that she died of a heart attack with no evidence of suicide or foul play. So there again, we can't go back and ask her. And I don't think she would tell us anyway, because she completely denied any wrongdoing. So she's not going to come forward and say, well, I was abused as a child, but I didn't do it. She's not going to do that. So her story was also adapted into a Lifetime film called Poisoned Love, the Stacey Castor Story, as part of its Ripped from the Headlines feature film series. It was made for television and was first transmitted February 1st of 2020. And the film starred Nia Vardalos as Castor. So I haven't seen that one, but it would be interesting to try to look up and stream. Lifetime, typically you can stream their material, so I would be interested in watching that. There's a lot of pictures on the internet. There's a lot of things about her. Her mugshot is on there, and she's someone that you wouldn't. I mean, you would probably pass her and think nothing of her. There's nothing about her that's really special or stands out, or she's just very normal looking. And so all the things that she did really just amplifies the fact that she does have that, psychopathic tendencies that evidently they were never picked up on before, or if they were, no one did anything about it. I know as educators, we will sit down at a table at times if we're working with a child and we're a team trying to work with the child in class and they've got behaviors that are just way out of norm. We may say things like, I don't know. I'm telling you, he could be a serial killer. He's just got that turn to him. Well, if I say that at a meeting with other educators, does that mean that I'm going to turn around and go to his parent-teacher meeting and tell his parents I think he's going to be a serial killer? No, it is. I would never do that. What I would do, however, is exactly what I'm trying to create now. I'm trying to figure this out. How do we go about saying these behaviors are unacceptable? These behaviors are red flags. These are some of the things that can happen if we don't do something now. And I probably would never even say serial killer. I would say, that the pathway that they were on leads to violence, leads